Hey, it's Curly, and I know everyone wasn't as excited about set 5 as I initially was, but after getting the cards and playing around with it, I've been actually having a lot of fun with a lot of the new decks, including none other than the infamous Thegrea. So I was originally going to pick up Thegrea just cause haha, giant knockers and whatnot, but actually after they revealed what her playstyle actually is, I was actually extremely interested, like, oh no, this is actually really cool. So let's go over that really quickly. Thegrea is broken up into two different grade 3s. They both share the ability where if you ride one Thegrea over the other one, it counts as a persona ride. In addition to that, their two effects can be enhanced on whether or not you have the other one in the soul, or if you rode over the other one that turn. So let's go over the Light Thegrea, one who walks the path of light Thegrea. So as mentioned, her first effect is whenever she rides over a Thegrea from the hand, it counts as a persona ride as well. Then she has another effect where you can counterblast one, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and choose up to one grade 2 or less unit from among them and call it. And if you have the Dark Thegrea in your soul, you can choose 2 cards instead of 1. This is pretty good just for filling up your board, especially after getting board wiped or something like that, or even using them for resources for Dark Thegrea, intercepting, whatever the case may be. It also lets you conserve your hand because you don't have to, play out units from your hand. You can just play them out for your deck, which is nice. Offers a little bit of deck thinning as well. Then her second skill is at the end of the battle, this unit attack. If this unit was placed over by riding over the one who blooms in the Dark Thegrea this turn, you discard a card from your hand and choose one of your rear guards and stand it, which is very cool because it allows you to get in a 4th attack, especially after the Vanguard. So if your opponent, PGs your Vanguard swing, you can check your triggers and put them on your rear guard. They're going to restand. In general, you want to go into this Thegrea first just to push on your first grade 3 turn, get as much field presence and damage as you can. Then you would swap over to the Dark Thegrea here and try to close out the game. She has the same skill as the other Thegrea. When you ride over unit with Thegrea, it counts as a persona ride. Then she has a skill where you can retire 2 of your grade 2 or less rear guards, not a grade 3, and choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. But if you have the one who walks the path of light Thegrea in your soul, you retire all your opponent's rear guards in the same column as that unit, which is pretty good. It doesn't get around stuff like end picks because you do have to choose in the first part of the skill, but it is nice for some board control, wiping out some pesky targets. You can clear out an entire column, which is nice. I do wish sometimes you can just choose 2 units instead of a column. It might make this a little bit more useful. The retire 2 is a little heavy, so you don't often go into this, but again, it is a nice option to have, and some people even forget that this skill is there because they really just know Thegrea, or the Dark Thegrea, for her second skill. At the end of the battle, this unit attack, if this unit was placed by riding over the one who walks the path of light Thegrea, this turn you counterblast 1 discarded card to stand this unit and get -1 drive. So you get a restanding Vanguard, which is why I say you want to go into this as your sort of finisher, right? And that's kind of the main game plan that you can see forming here between these Thegreas and the Thegrea deck overall. That you want to just constantly get your different Thegreas in hand and in soul and constantly keep riding over them, So you have a lot of decent power presence in the fact that you always have persona ride active. In addition to that, you have the constant multi-attack pressure from both the restanding and also the restanding Vanguard. Restanding unit, restanding Vanguard. The only problem with this is that you don't really do too much on your first grade 3 turn, so this is kind of a grade 4 deck if you want to consider it that, since you can't ride over the Dark Thegrea until at least your turn 4, right? And your grade 4 or your turn 4 turn isn't as strong as some of the other grade 4 decks if you want to consider it that way, because you just get a restanding Vanguard that doesn't really get any additional crit or anything like that, so she alone doesn't really create a lot of pressure. In general, this deck is pretty nice, it's pretty balanced. It does a lot of nice things. You know, you can fill out your board, you can retire, you can multi-attack, you can do a lot of really cool things, and it has a lot of cool cards that allow you to make that happen pretty easily. But before we get into those, let's just go over the ride deck really quickly. This is the grade 0 Knight of Integrity Thegrea. Managed to pull the SP, which was really nice, because these SPs go for a lot, given the waifu techs of it all, and also, obviously, the grade 3s are worth a lot, SP. But Knight of Integrity Thegrea doesn't do much other than when you ride upon it and you went second, you draw a card. Then you can go into your grade 1, where you have to ride specifically over the, or rather, its effect is only activated when you ride the grade 2 over it, specifically, where you can reveal the top card of your deck, and if it is a grade 2 or less unit, you may call it to Rearguard Circle as rest. The at rest part is a little bit annoying sometimes, but what you can do with this is, if unlike some of the other effects, such as like the Bastion ride line, where you have to just call out whatever it is, you can actually just put the card back if you decide not to call it, right? Because it says you may call it, so you don't have to call it. So if it's a trigger, you can just leave it there, and also let you know, oh hey, there's a trigger coming up, I can plan accordingly. It's unfortunate that this is, again, another card that would be nice for Hexor, but that isn't indirectly supporting Hexor. Then, you have the grade 2 here, and when you ride over any of the grade 3 Thegreas here for the harsh training, this is harsh training Thegrea, if you ride over with any of the grade 3 Thegreas, you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You can choose either one Thegrea or Maple, or card with those names I should say, from those 5, add it to your deck, or sorry, add it to your hand, and then shuffle your deck, which is really nice. Maple is very important, we'll go over that in a little bit, and you can automatically, you know, even hit one of your Thegrea, so you can Persona ride over it next turn. And for this deck specifically, we're going to be starting out in the light Thegrea in the ride deck, and I feel like that's typically what everyone goes for, right? Because the ability to call out 1 or 2 cards on your first grade 3 turn is more useful than the ability to retire 2 to retire a column. Usually your opponent might not even have that kind of board presence yet, so it's not really worth it, whereas this lets you set up for maybe a good turn next turn and push as well. So that's the ride deck. We'll go over things a little bit in reverse this time around. We're going to go over the grade 3s here. My grade 3 lineup is very simple. I just play 4 of the Dark Thegrea, 2 of the Light Thegrea. The theory behind this is essentially you don't want to go into the Light Thegrea as much as the Dark Thegrea. You obviously want to flip-flop between the two. Technically you have 3 copies, since you have 1 from the ride deck, right? But as I mentioned, you want to go into Light, then go into Dark, hopefully close the game. If not, go back into Light, then go back into Dark, close out the game, right? That's the main game plan here, which is why we're playing more of the Dark. We're also playing more of the Dark just so that we can search it out easier, and then we can activate the second part of Thegrea's, I guess, second skill technically, not kind of a continuous one, so that on your first grade 3 turn, you can actually very easily call out 2 units. Next up, we'll go over the grade 2s, starting off with Maple here, which is probably one of the most important core cards for this deck, as it is the glitter counterpart for Thegrea, which means that obviously supports her very well. Maple here, atrocious Moth Girl, or I should say atrocious Moth Girl Maple here, has 2 abilities, both of which are very good, one of which can actually be used in other decks to very good effect, making this one of the few cards with glitter that's actually very useful. So what she does is, whenever you ride a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, if you have this card in your drop, and you don't already have a unit with Maple and its card name on board, you can call this to Rearguard Circle. You can only call 1 of this, but this is very nice because it constantly gives you the 10k attacker interceptor every single turn that you ride your grade 3 or your grade 4, which is pretty good. If you combo this, for example, with a Magnolia Elder, you can very consistently pull out your Inlet Pulse from Soul and then call a Maple, and always have 2 cards on board. But more importantly for this deck, this lets us do quite a lot of things, since obviously we're constantly Persona writing. So we're always writing grade 3, which means this is pretty much always active as long as we have it in our drop. We can always recur it, which is very nice. But the most important part of Maple in this deck is the second skill here, which is only active if you have a Thegrea with a glitter as your Vanguard, and this says, at the end of the battle, if this unit attacked, doesn't have to hit. You Soul Blast one or more cards, and then you choose a card with your soul with the same grade as the sum of the cards you Soul Blasted. So if you Soul Blast a grade 1 and a 2, you can add a grade 3 from your soul into your hand. And that's essentially what you want to do. You want to get your Thegrea, your grade 3 Thegrea in soul, then attack with Maple, Soul Blast 2 cards, and then bring out that Thegrea in soul into your hand so you can Persona Ride with it next turn. You have to be very careful that you either attack with Maple last or use whatever skill you're using with Thegrea, because you know this will pull out the Thegrea from your soul. So if you have the grade 3 Thegrea that says you need the other one in soul, if you don't have it anymore, then obviously it's not going to count. But we're going to be playing 4 copies of atrocious Moth Girl Maple. The next sort of cornerstone of this deck here is the Drilling Angel, which we're going to be playing at 4 copies. Drilling Angel here is an amazing card that we've talked about a little bit in both of the Hexorb deck profiles I've done, and now he's actually pretty much an essential part in this set for a lot of the Keter Sanctuary decks. But what Drilling Angel does is when he's placed on Record Circle, you put a card from your drop into your soul. Then you look at the top 3 cards of your deck and you can choose one card with the same card name as the card you put into your soul for this cause and call it. And then you shuffle your deck, right? So one thing, the way this is worded, it says choose up to 1 card. So if you do find the card from the top 3, you don't have to call it. But maybe the obvious use of this card is to put in your Thegrea from your soul. What this lets you do is use your Thegreas and your Maples as discard fodder for your Ride deck. Then you can bring back Maple with her effect, and you can put back those Thegreas into your soul with Drilling Angel here. Drilling Angel is also very good if you put in grade 2s or grade 1s into your soul, so you can then use them with Maple's effect. Drilling Angel is amazing. You can even use him to actually be able to fill up your board a little bit with his effect. Then we have another somewhat staple in Thegrea here. We're going to be playing 4 copies of the Knight of Protection Spear Arthwin. Arthwin here is a very good card for Keter Sanctuary here. I would say definitely try and pick up 4 of them if you plan on playing any Keter deck, because you'll definitely be a nice little tech option in most decks. But he has 2 skills here. If he's in the front row, rearguard circle, continuous, all of your rearguards with different card names from this unit cannot be chosen by your opponent's card effects. I originally thought it was anything that had unique names on board, but it's just anything that doesn't have his name. So if your opponent has something that targets, they can only target this card, which is nice. So it gives you a little bit of protection against some of the annoying effects that are out there, right? Then he has a second skill that where if this unit attacks, if you Persona roll this turn, he actually gets 5k until the end of turn, which is nice because you're always basically going to be Persona riding, which means this is always going to be a very nice hefty 25k attacker by himself. So this is usually the call target or the target for your restand with the light Thegrea, because you can swing in with 25 and then swing again with another 25, or with a booster for a 33, which is a very nice number to have. So he's very good on offense and on defense. Then the final grade 2 we have here is 2 copies of the Knight of Heavenly Bullets, Proclus here. This card is very interesting. In theory, it should be very, very good in this deck. And I can tell you why in a couple of seconds. However, I think I'm actually going to be swapping him out for some of the other options we'll go over later. But Proclus here has a very simple effect. You can put this unit into their soul and rest another rearguard to look at the top 3 cards from your deck, choose any number of grade 3 from among them, reveal them, and put them into your hand and discard the rest. So this does 3 things really well. Very obviously, it lets you put Thegreas into your hand, multiple of them at that, right? So that's very good. The other thing it can do is it can let you discard your Maples into your drop zone. Maybe even some grade 1s that you can then put into your soul with Drilling Angel, right? So it fills up your drop, which is nice. Then it also gives you soul of a grade 2, which is, you know, pretty decent. So you can use that with another grade 1 in order to have it get soul blasted out with Maple skill in order to add a Thegrea. So in theory, this card is actually pretty solid for this deck. However, I have done maybe 8 games, 10 games? 10 games with this build, and he has yet to be very useful. The problem with that might be just the small amount of grade 3s I actually play in this deck, so I don't actually get to hit him as effectively, and also I usually hard mulligan for a Dark Thegrea, so that takes out 1, so it really only has but barely any chances to actually hit. But in theory, this card is really good. Next up for the grade 1s here, it's going to be pretty simple. We have Knight of Desolation Fionola here, which is a very simple grade 1 where if there's no units in the same column, including your opponent's rearguard, so he gets 10k. So I just use this to get some early game pressure so that I can hopefully finish the game once I ride my Dark Thegrea, right? She's also useful as a booster afterwards in case I need her. Then the last grade 1 we're going to play aside from PDs is 2 copies of Painkiller Angel here, which aside from being very good at drawing cards, it more importantly gets out the maple from your soul here. Painkiller Angel says that at the end of the battle, if this unit boosted, you Soul Blast 1, retire this unit to draw a card. I am possibly going to add another copy of her into my deck. Maybe play 3 and then 3 of the Fionola, but I might end up changing her as well. In general, I've been very happy with this build and how it's performed, but I feel like I can maybe make it a little bit better with some experimental ideas that we'll go over in the options section. But overall, this build has worked really well. Especially the Fionola has been really good in getting that early game pressure, because you can swing in with this. If you went second, you can actually swing in with this, and even if your opponent checks a trigger, you still hit, because this will be 18k on their grade 1 Vanguard. And if you yourself hit a trigger, you can pretty easily go ahead and hit your opponent for 3 damage before they even ride their grade 2, which is really good. For the triggers, it's going to be pretty simple here. We're going to be playing 4 copies of this crit, and then 4 copy of this crit. So basically just 8 copies of the normal crits. I decided not to play any of the soul crits. 1, because I'm kind of running out of them. But more importantly, you don't really need it in this deck. You don't really need the soul. You don't need a grade 0 in your soul either, because it doesn't help for Maple's skill, because 0 plus something else doesn't add any value, right? Which is why we're playing 8 copies of this normal crit. We're playing 8 crits because we want our Dark Thegrea to be as lethal as possible. Because obviously you can check your crits on your first swing, then restand her and she keeps that crit, right? Playing 3 copies of the new draw. Whenever your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater and you guard with this, it gets 5k shield, so it's a 10k shield. This is probably a little bit of a weird option. A lot of people tend to deck out with Thegrea just because you Persona ride so much and sort of search through your deck and whatnot. Again, I've played this like 10 times. I've only decked out once so far, and that's probably because I don't play as many copies of Painkiller Angel. And I only decked out that one time because it was against Prison, right? And that's through Cuff Spring and all that jazz. So I think draws are pretty good. Lets you get all your pieces. You get to have a really nice fat hand with this deck because you're constantly Persona writing and then searching out from your deck to call stuff, so you don't have to play cards from hand as much, which is very nice. We're going to play 2 copies of the normal heal here. Then we'll play 4 heals in your deck. When this is checked, if you have equal or greater damage as your opponent, you can heal 1 damage. And we're actually going to be playing 2 of the new heal trigger here. I found that I have a lot of trouble, and it's very few decks that can actually get a crit on a unit, which is why I'm trying this out right now. I haven't had too many issues with restanding units, so I don't feel like using the other one. But right now we're going to try this. What this does is if you guard with this, at base value it's only a 10k shield, but if you guard against it with a unit that has a 2 criticals or more, and it is gained from an ability, not from a trigger, this becomes a 25k shield. And I feel like that would be very useful in this deck, because I feel like I can guard most of the multi-attacking decks, but when it comes to adding criticals, I kind of have to pick and choose my battles there. We're going to be playing 1 of the vanilla Cray Elemental Overtrigger. The Keter Sanctuary Overtrigger isn't exactly bad for this deck. I would say it's pretty good, especially if you're on the light Thegrea. because you can check it, and then the rear guard that restands gets drive check, but usually you're restanding grade 2s, or you're always pretty much restanding grade 2s because you can only do grade 2 or less. So you're only getting one drive. One drive is better than no drive, obviously. But that card is like $20. So we're going to be playing this, which isn't too bad, because what you can do with this is you can swing in with, let's say, your Arthwin, and then swing in with your Light Thegrea, check this, put this on Arthwin and the Maple that hasn't attacked yet, for example, and then swing in with your Arthwin and then your Maple for 100 million damage, right? So it's not too bad, but there is possibly more merit in playing the other overtrigger. And then finally, we're playing 4 copies of the Sentinel here, the Asmir Dragon, even though it looks like a freaking horse to me, but you just guard with this. It's a perfect guard, so whatever unit is being attacked does not get hit. And if you have 2 or more cards, you do have to discard for this. If you don't have to discard, which is nice. So typically with Thegrea, you just want to ride into your grade 1, discard something like the Maple or the Thegrea, the Dark Thegrea here. And then with this build specifically, you can play your Finanala that turn if you can attack. She gets a nice 10k boost because there's nothing else in that column, which means you can more or less guarantee 2 damage with this turn. Then you go ahead and ride on for your grade 1 Thegrea with your grade 2. And you can use your skill to maybe reveal a crit or something like that, put it back on top of your deck, or reveal something useful like a Drilling Angel, which you can then call out as rest. And if you, for example, discarded your Dark Thegrea this turn for the grade 2, you can then go ahead and put that in your soul thanks to Drilling Angel's effect. You can look then at the top 3 cards of your deck, and if there's any grade 3s, you can add them. After that, you can really get the ball rolling here, going into your Light Thegrea here. You can bring out your Maple and use Thegrea's skill here to counterblast. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck and call out 2 of those now that you have the Dark Thegrea in there. Right? So you can very easily just grab 2 units and fill up your board with that if you wanted to, which is very good. Unfortunately, you won't be able to use Thegrea's skill to restand this turn, because it's only when you ride over the Dark Thegrea, but you can make nice swings here and still have pretty good hand presence. Then you can ride over your grade 3 Thegrea with the other grade 3 Thegrea. You may retire 2 units in order to retire a column if necessary, but go ahead and swing in, counterblast, discard to restand. Hopefully you manage to get some crits on Thegrea here, and then, swing in again with a single drive and hopefully end the game. If not, you kind of just go back to your previous phase, go into Light Thegrea, fill up your board, and swing in that way. And that's basically how this deck works. And in general, when it comes for your mulligan, for this build specifically, you want to make sure you have at least 1 or 2 of these in your hand. For the Finanala is only for this build specifically, just so you can get aggro. This is still active if you play going first, but your opponent still probably won't have anything, so this is still active. But in general, you want to make sure you have at least these 3. These 2 to discard and this to put this back. You don't always need the Dark Thegrea, you can always try and search it out later, but ideally your starting hand would ideally consist of these 3. So let's go over some options here. You can play the Knights of Friendship K and the Knight of Loyalty Belvedere here. This doesn't have to be in a blaster specific deck. You can use this in any Keter Sanctuary deck. You can only use the effect of Belvedere if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, but in which case you can counterblast Soul Blast 1, search off a Knight of Friendship K, put that in the back row, and then K, if he's boosting Belvedere, gets +5. So this becomes a nice little 23k column every single turn, which is very good. And it also lets you Soul Blast your Maples, for example, right? So it gives you a nice sense of consistency. Next up, from set 5, you can actually play the new Blaster Blade in this set. I've been wanting to sneak him in. I might get rid of that grade 2 and put him in, just because he is nice for the field control, and since I have the Finanalas myself, this is pretty nice just to wipe out more of your opponent's board between this and the Dark Thegrea, you can wipe out 3 of your opponent's units, right? So it's very nice for board control if you want it. As a sort of alternative to Drilling Angel, or in addition to Drilling Angel, you can also play the Witch of Moon Rabbit Robinia here. What she does is, on place, you can counterblast 1, choose a card from your hand, put it into your soul, and draw 1. So there is an option for that. There's also a grade 1 that does something very similar to Robinia here, where it's the same skill, except instead of drawing or having a counterblast, you give one of your Vanguards 5k, right? So you can play either one of those in addition to Drilling Angel or instead of Drilling Angel if you so prefers to do so. Next up, we've got the Knight of Heavenly Shield in Compassionment Felicida. Usually this is what everyone plays with Thegrea, and her skill is very, very helpful for Thegrea. I will probably ditch my grade 3 Searcher guy for 2 copies of this and see how it works. I originally didn't like it because of the cost, but what this does is if you Persona Rogue this turn, you can counterblast 2, retire this unit, choose a grade 3 unit, and it gets +1 drive until the end of the turn. Now, just keep in mind the ability to get, or the ability to drive check and the ability to have +1 drive are not mutually exclusive. That is to say, if you give this to a rearguard Thegrea, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden they can drive check, right? It just means if they could drive check, they can do it for an additional one. But you can do this essentially for your Dark Thegrea, which allows her to swing in with triple drive on her first swing, and then her second swing is with, you know, twin drive, which is very lethal. It's very good. I will possibly also take out the draw triggers for fronts if that's the case, because I'll be drawing 5 cards in a turn instead of 3. But I think this card is very, very good for this deck. Here is another card that I think is actually pretty good, and I haven't seen a lot of people play it. This is the Knight of Heavenly Piercing Elslata. What this does is when you place this on Rearguard Circle, or if you discard it during your turn, you can choose one of your back row rearguards and stand it. So this has a couple of applications in this deck. One, with some of the cards that we have that force us to rest, such as the grade 3 Searcher, you can just play this, restand that unit, which is very nice. Also, if you discard this for the Thegrea cost, to restand one of your rearguards, you can swing in with that column and then stand that column, which is very nice, which makes your turns or that swing a lot more lethal or a lot more dangerous, which is actually pretty sick. I would maybe suggest like playing 3 of this instead of 4 Fanola, and then playing an extra Painkiller, and then the other grade 3 that we just saw instead of the grade 2, which is a build that I'll try out for this deck, right? And I think that might actually work out good as well. Another grade 2 that forces you to rest, is a little bit interesting here, is the Knight of Heavenly Destruction Kelplid here. So when this is placed from your hand, so you can't call this from Thegrea's skill and use her discard skill, but you can counterblast rest one of your other rearguards, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's an order grade 3 card, you can put it into your hand, and if it's not, you can call it. So you can counterblast rest something to get an extra card. If you call the grade 1 we just called out, we just showed, you can then stand the unit that you rested, which is really interesting. But obviously you can go ahead and add a Thegrea to your hand. Next over, we'll go over Heavenly Bow of Edifying Guidance or Refuerzos here, which is also pretty solid in this deck. I don't know why this is double sleeves. If you Persona Roll this turn, this unit gets Pierce, so it's a 13k booster because it's a grade 3. Then in the back row, once per turn, if the another unit stood by a card effect, you can stand this unit. So again, you can use this to get a full column to re-stand with Thegrea's light skill. Typically, we don't really play orders in Thegrea, but this one is a little bit interesting. This is Downswing of Sword of Judgment. You Soul Blast a grade 3 with this to choose one of your opponent's rear guards, and then they put all units in that column to the bottom of their deck. So you can combine this with your Dark Thegrea to just wipe out most of your opponent's board, which is interesting. You can Soul Blast your grade 3 Thegrea and then put her back with Drilling Angel if you're going to have an extra copy. So just a little interesting card that I saw. Don't think you really need to play this, but it is a nice little option if you want a little bit more control in your Thegrea deck. final card we'll go over is Divine Sister Fashata here. She has a very simple skill where if you drive check a trigger, Soul Blast 2, countercharge 1. Typically you don't really counterblast a lot in this deck, but you can definitely put in cards that make you counterblast, since you really only counterblast once for the light Thegrea, and that's about it, right? Until you ride her again. Or if you use the dark Thegrea, you counterblast once that turn. So you don't really use a lot of counterblast, but you can definitely fit in cards like Blaster Blade, and so on and so forth that let you counterblast, and this lets you get some countercharge for that. And it also has the ability to Soul Blast, which means you can take out your maples from your soul. But I don't really think it's worth it, to be honest, but I just thought I'd mention it. That does it for the Thegrea deck. Again, you can take any of the options or my build and mess around with it as you'd like. It's a little bit more flexible than, let's say, Tamayura or Eva, where it doesn't really need as many, force pieces, right? Like, you just really need the Maple and Thegreas, but you have a lot of space to play around with, and there's a good amount of cards in Keter Sanctuary that you can actually use that randomly support Thegrea, as I just went over. But in any case, let me know what you thought about this video down in the comments below. Let me know what you thought about my build or just Thegrea as a whole. I think she's really good. She kind of is in this weird spot where she maybe just needs one more piece of support and she'll be really good, because she doesn't really do much early, right? Unless you play some good supporting grade 1s or grade 2s, then she kind of needs a lot to be able to do both of her grade 3 skills, but then they're not super lethal. So she just needs a little bit more something to push her over. But that's just my thoughts. Until next time, take care of yourself.